It feels like a long time ago now, but last summer in Britain saw the hottest July day ever. That doesn't prove anything on its own. Each year will be different. But scientists say there is a pattern of rising temperatures. David Shukman, BBC News.
Well, let's talk now to Dr. Paul Williams, who's a climate change expert from the University of Reading. Thanks for being with us, Paul. Just explain then the significance of this 1 degree centigrade rise. It maybe doesn't sound that much to many people, but why is it so important?
The importance stems from the fact that a few years ago, at a conference convened by Tony Blair, it was decided by a process which is slightly opaque to many of us, but it was decided that 2 degrees Celsius worth of warming would be what would constitute dangerous climate change. Now, that's not to say that 1.9 degrees Celsius of warming is safe and that if we cross to 2.1 degrees, suddenly the world will end. What it means, though, is that for every 1/10 of a degree warming that we see, just the probability of hazardous weather events like storms and heat waves and flooding, those probabilities just creep up and up and up. And we're now looking like almost certainly that this year will be halfway towards that 2 degree dangerous threshold.
And what is your reading then now, given that we have gone up by 1% of the dangers that we face? Just spell out what that means in real terms for the planet.
Well, many of the projected changes are what you might call incremental, in the sense that it's just probabilities increasing of prolonged heat waves, flooding, drought. Perhaps more worryingly, though, are what we call irreversible changes in the climate system, or tipping points. For example, there's a lot of methane currently stored in permafrost. So this is permanently frozen throughout the year, including summer, ice, locking in methane, which is a very powerful greenhouse gas. Now, if the warming gets too high, there's a risk of that ice melting and releasing into the atmosphere all of its methane. That's not something we'll be able to reverse if we suddenly realise we've done something dangerous. Once that methane gets into the atmosphere, there's no way of getting it back out of the atmosphere. That's irreversible climate change, and what we're saying is that the probability of these irreversible shifts happening is increasing with every 1/10 of a degree Celsius of warming.
And what should we do now? What would you like to see done right now to stop all of this? If you could wave a magic wand, or if you were suddenly ruler of the world?
Yeah, that's a big question. To some extent, that's a policy question rather than a science question, and my expertise really stops at the science. But what I can tell you is that what the science tells us from decades of research is that the climate is changing. Almost certainly the dominant cause of those changes is human emissions of carbon dioxide. And we know as scientists that the only plausible way of stopping this climate change from becoming dangerous is to cut our carbon dioxide emissions. And the sooner we do it and the deeper those cuts are, the less we have to cut in future. So we're storing up a bit of a problem, in the sense that even if we cut emissions today, the temperature would continue to rise because there's a time delay in the climate system. What all of this is telling me is that it's becoming increasingly urgent, really, that we do something about our carbon dioxide emissions and do something to cut them down pretty urgently.
Good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Dr. Paul Williams there, climate change expert at the University of Reading. Now the time is almost 25 minutes past 7. Let's take a look at some of the